Today we have Tim Crockett. He's the founder of Tame The Kraken and Rotor Recovery. Tim, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing today?
Doing well, yeah. It's the end of the week, and we're getting the boat kind of prepped and ready to head down and do a week's worth of training with my son.
Yeah, that'll be fun. So? Are all the supplies? You got all the supplies you need? Are you all ready to go, or are you missing a few
So,
things?
yeah, the boat itself, I would say, is like 99% ready to go. We may find that we need a few more pieces once we're out on the water next week, but other than food, I think yeah, all the equipment is ready to go.
What are you planning on eating out there? Steak dinner? Or...
I wish. If you could get a freeze dried or dehydrated version, then maybe. But yeah, if you look at, we call them expedition rations, but if you look at kind of the camping rations that you can get from
Yeah.
anyone at outdoor stores where you have to just rehydrate, that's pretty much what we're going to be eating while we're out there for the full 45 days. All in all, I would imagine we've got just over 500,000 calories on board, give or
Wow.
take 1,000.
Yeah, that's quite a bit. So I'm just going to circle back. You're planning on rowing, you and your son, right, from San Francisco to Honolulu, Hawaii. Is that right?
No, we're actually going to go into the Big Island. So Hilo on the Big
Okay,
Island.
Hilo. Is that just a little bit closer?
Uh, a little bit. It's all relative because
Yeah.
you're never going to take a straight line or a run line to the destination. It's going to be where the wind will blow you. But I've done some work and I'm familiar with the Big Island and Hilo Bay in particular. And
Right.
that just being a natural place. And given the fact that you're so close to Wrigley Field, if you look at the Big Island and Hilo Bay, which is on the eastern side of the island, it's like a big catcher's mitt. So it's a bigger target to aim for, and it should be
That
quite
makes
an easy
sense. Yeah.
place. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're going out there, you said you try to run line. Do you do great circles at all, or are you just going
Given the fact
straight for it?
that it's over kind of 2,400 nautical miles, so that's closer to somewhere like 2,600, 2,700 statute miles. So as you know, you're going to be on a map or a chart. It looks like a straight line, but you're going to be a little bit off with that.
Right.
The currents, the wind, like I said, they affect the boat much more than anything else.
Okay. So break it down. You're rowing. You and your son are going to row in like not like a canoe or anything. Just a. It's one of those ocean huge. I mean, they're not huge, but they're large rowers, right?
Yeah,
Large
it's all
boats.
relative. Yeah, it's a specially built um, ocean rowing boat. So if
Okay.
you could look at it and say, well, that looks a little bit like a sailing boat without the mast, which a marine architect that designed the boat, yes, that's kind of what they're looking for. It's very smooth lines. The nose of the boat can pierce the waves and obviously give you relief from any waves that crash over you. But it's pretty much a 24-foot boat powered by us and a set of oars.
So are you? What's the plan? What's your plan of attack going into this?
So we can back it up a little bit. In 2018, I rode solo across the Atlantic from the Canary Islands to Antigua. So that's about 3,000 nautical miles. The main difference between the Atlantic and the Pacific is the sort of weather system.
Okay.
With the Atlantic, we pretty much, once the wind's in the right direction, you set off from the second smallest island in the Canary Islands, and you just go with the wind. Now, again, the wind will move and it'll be in your favor and sometimes against you. But with the Pacific, the prevailing winds sort of sweep down from north to south down the west coast and then kind of hook out towards the Hawaiian Islands. So one of the greatest challenges will happen pretty early on in the actual challenge is that we're going to have to fight to get off the continental shelf. So we're going to be going kind of beam on to a lot of the weather and the wind for the first 10 to 20 days before we kind of get into the wind systems that will then kind of push us across towards the island. So, yeah, we're going to be setting out from San Francisco Bay, hopefully from a small marina just a mile or two inside the bay. Go out underneath the Golden Gate Bridge on an exiting tide, and then out into the big ocean and away from there.
Yeah, yeah, that'll be a great beginning of the trip. Is there any particular reason why San Francisco is the starting point?
I think historically, those that have attempted and actually rode the Pacific, whether they've gone what is called the sort of mid-Pacific from the west coast to the Hawaiian Islands, has traditionally left from San Francisco. I think that was mainly because it was the main kind of population, and
Right.
it just made sense. Um, a lot of other rowers or even kayakers have left from Monterey and further south, even as far south as just northern Mexico. But they've either gone via a different route or they've gone all the way across the Pacific. The very first, which was not a husband and wife, but a male female partner, were the first to go all the way across to Australia. And they left out of San Francisco Bay. They actually then came down the coast because they had some problems before they then moved further across. So we chose to go out of San Francisco instead of Monterey to give us that additional 80 to sort of 90 miles further north. So if the weather was too severe or too challenging to sort of fight against, we can come down with the weather a little bit and not lose too much of a northing, so we can still make the islands and just increase our chances of success.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So when you're doing this, do you have like an autopilot that kind of keeps you steady on course while you're the manpower on it, or are you constantly
Yeah,
correcting?
and I'm chuckling a little bit to myself here. So when you're a solo rower, you're very reliant on an auto helm or an auto tiller to help keep you on the right kind of path. If you don't have one of those, you can foot steer. You can set up the steering lines that will then kind of come to a movable foot plate that you can manipulate. But
So
that's
as
it.
you're rowing, you're also
So you
going
can
back
sort of
and
test and
forth
adjust from
around.
there. But it's easier with an auto helm. But they're not designed for the boat. So you have to sort of jerry rig a system, and there's a lot of stress that becomes on the actual system itself, and the electric motor can easily burn out if you're kind of fighting the weather too much. So the best practice is to have more than one auto helm and routinely rotate them like every 4 hours, every 6 hours, so you're not kind of burning the electrical motor out. That was the advice that got given to me when I did the Atlantic. I noted it down in my notebook and then completely forgot about it. And then it was about 9 days into the race, I started having problems with my auto helm and basically had to MacGyver it all the way across. And it died probably about 2 miles short of the finish line in Antigua.
Wow,
So
that's
lesson
lucky.
learned. We'll be taking four of them on this trip.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's back it up though. Why are you doing this? Why are you crossing from San Francisco to Hawaii? What's the purpose?
So I've done the Atlantic as I mentioned, and I chose to do that back in 2018 because my own background. I'm a veteran, a former British military, and kind of back in I think it was early 2016, I reconnected with an old military buddy of mine. We hadn't spoken for probably 20 years, and just reliving the good old days. We'd served together in the same unit. We were on the Royal Navy or the Royal Marines boxing squad together. Um, and then 6 weeks after that, I came to find out that he had died by suicide, and he'd been suffering pretty badly from post-traumatic stress.
I'm really sorry to
So
hear
I
that.
felt like I wanted to honor him, his memory, and obviously draw some attention to um, what was then kind of the start of what people call this epidemic of suicides, certainly within the military community. Um, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and it was about 6 weeks after that that I came across ocean rowing. I had another friend of mine who was part of a team of five that were rowing from Portugal to Venezuela. And it was just one afternoon following along with that race, kind of disappeared down that Google rabbit hole, saw the history around ocean rowing going back 100 years or so. That a race had kind of come out of it 21 years prior to the year that I did it, and that it is like one of the last few true challenges are out there. And to put that into perspective, fewer people have rowed any ocean solo than have been into space. Like
Wow.
if you look at the year that I did my race, which was 2018, 2019, um, there were five of us that competed solo, and that was within a fleet of 28 boats. 27 finished. The others were like pairs, threes, fours, and fives. Um, as well as that organized race, there were some independent crossings.
Hmm.
So that year, the 2018 2019 season, there were 11 people that rowed across the Atlantic. That same season, more than 800 people climbed Everest. So
Wow.
if you think climbing the world's tallest mountain is a challenge, like I said, that is becoming fairly sort of routine.
Yeah.
And while ocean rowing is now much safer and it's much more popular than it once was, it's still a very small sport, and that's for a number of reasons. Not just the challenge; it's an expensive endeavor. Anything to do with boats is expensive, but then when
That
you
is the truth.
you layer in uh, kind of the safety aspect, then yes, it takes a while to get ready for it, and that's mainly organizing the funds, the sponsorships, getting the boat, getting the requisite training, and then, like I said, all the equipment, and even just the food to fill the boat can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I believe that. I mean, in what next week you are sea trialing, right? You're doing a
That's
little
right.
prep
Yeah,
work.
I'm just finishing up, putting a few lanyards on the oars and a few other bits of equipment. Not that we expect to capsize next week, because we'll be in either the intercoastal or just off the southeast coast of Georgia and northern Florida. But anything that's up on deck essentially has to be attached, because if you do get hit by a rogue wave or capsize, the boat's designed to self-right, but anything that's not attached is quickly going to get like
Swept
floated
away.
away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, we have to
Float
make
away
sure
or
that it's
sink.
right on, including ourselves. Like
Yeah.
whenever we're outside of our cabins, we'll be clipped on as well.
That's good. That's good. And does your son have any experience doing this, or is this kind of
No,
something?
so he's following in my footsteps in the sense that I had never rowed prior to doing the Atlantic. I kind of went around the whole rowing journey back to front. Yes, I'd done some rowing on an erg for kind of like those uh, high intensity sort of workouts and just to add into the normal gym routine, but I'd not had any formal rowing training and certainly not been in a rowboat previously. So I had to get myself ready for that. I had about a week's worth of training on my boat before I did the Atlantic. And my son, he's a freshman in college now, 19 years old. So again, he's not had any real rowing experience. He's had a little bit more than I had. But next week we'll get a probably 100, some odd hours in of solid rowing, which is important, but it's also more important to make sure you know the systems on the boat. Like we'll be
Absolutely.
making use
Yeah.
a water maker, and obviously how to deploy a sea anchor and recover all those things, all the sort of things that you'd expect with a boat. That's the more important piece. I said going into the Atlantic, I didn't want to do too much rowing because I might get bored, but also I've got 3,000 miles to practice.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah. So, you mentioned how you just got into rowing in like 2018. But where's your like background come from? You said you were special forces officer uh,
Well, I
prior.
wasn't an officer, but yes, you're right. I was in the British military. Started off in the Royal Marines, and then moved up into the Special Boat Service, which is kind of like the UK equivalent of your SEALs. So yes, a lot of time either in, on, or under the water, small boats. It was an environment that obviously I'm comfortable in.
Hmm.
comfortable being uncomfortable. So I wasn't really phased by that side of it. But in rowing and certainly tackling something like this by yourself was something that I'd never done before, and certainly not for that duration. I was on the Atlantic for 63 days. We anticipate to be on the Pacific for around about 45 days. Again, it depends on what the weather's going to throw at us.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, my background, like I said, when you hear about it, you think, well, that makes it obvious. Why wouldn't you do something like this? But it while that is an advantage to some extent, it is still very much about preparation and preparing oneself for the actual challenge, which most people, and having done it myself now, it's more of a mental than it is a physical challenge. And again, it's one of those things that once you're on the ride, it's very difficult to get off the ride. And if you do get off the ride, then it's a big decision to make, because it then obviously activates kind of a series of events that would force a ship to come to our aid and rescue. So the plan is not to do that, and just to muscle or grit through it to get to the other end.
Yeah, yeah, that would be a kind of a last resort type thing. You'd have to have a medical emergency, I think, to decide to
Yeah,
do that,
like I
right?
said, we're self sufficient.
Hmm.
So if you can picture, the boat is 24 foot long. There's a small little cabin either end. One goes up underneath the deck. The other one is can accommodate someone like 6'4". So we're in tight quarters. The working deck is around about like 12 foot long by 5 foot wide. Two rowing positions. All of your storage is below deck in the normal sort of water tight compartments. There's two central compartments. One is really for your life raft, and then the other one is for your sea anchor, or your ropes, and your emergency water, like your ballast, will go into the bottom of the boat. Everything else in the cabins is your clothes, your
Hmm.
bedding, and then the electronics for the boat, so your navigation, your radios, and satellite communications, all that sort of stuff. So it's quite a Spartan existence on there. We have two solar panels on the boat that recharge the two marine batteries that we have, and they're primarily used to run the water maker. And that's our most expensive piece of equipment on the boat, other than the boat itself. And obviously, without water, you're not going to last long in any sort of condition, but certainly not out on the high seas.
No,
Um,
and you guys don't have like an assist boat or anything. This is just your
no, like I said, when
completely alone.
we cast off from San Francisco, that's us by ourselves until we come into Hawaii.
Wow, wow. So a
We're
lot. I mean, yeah, you definitely have to have a. I think the mental aspect, you're right, would be the most difficult. I mean, being in the special forces, did you have any experiences where you really relied on your mental uh, capabilities there?
well. I think the first piece, like, is getting into any special forces unit. It is the the process of going through that kind of induction training, whether it's a selection or a course that you go through. It's tried and tested. It's structured to put you at your limits anyway, and actually maybe even slightly beyond them. So it's looking for those individuals that can not necessarily come in perfectly fit and perfectly able to pass. I've seen Olympic biathletes kind of fall by the wayside because they weren't mentally resilient for what was being thrown at them. Because the instructors are very good in figuring out what your weaknesses are and making sure that they push on those weaknesses to sort of test you and to test again the mental aspect.
Yeah.
So all the way through the course, and the course that I went through is almost 12 months in length. There are certain stages that are more stressful for different reasons for other people. It may be the boating phase in the first month, it may be the jungle phase, or it may even be kind of what we call the combat survival, the SEER training, when you're um, trying to survive and evade and then go through interrogation. So all of those pieces, yes, it prepares oneself to be a little bit more resilient than the average Joe, should we say?
Yeah, I
But
would say so.
um, having gone through all of that, it still doesn't prepare you for what I experienced on the Atlantic. If you took any one individual challenge, like a problem with the boat, a piece of equipment failing, a bad day's rowing because of the weather or just sheer exhaustion, I was prepared. But then when you stack several of those on top of each other, so you're dealing with sleep deprivation, you've got some equipment failure, food poisoning, and a bad day's rowing, all of a sudden, then like, you create more stress than you ever thought you could withstand,
Yeah.
and you start to doubt yourself. It's very hard then to like leave the cabin to get back up on deck and start rowing, or deal with the equipment failure or whatever it may be. So those are the aspects that again, it's very hard to train for, and it's an exercise in being able to kind of reframe the problem. So what I learned while I was on the Atlantic, um, while I was prepared, again, from my background, it took some outside influence from my race team, from my wife, from friends that I spoke to sort of get me to create a little bit of space with what I was dealing with and the actual moment, and then kind of just deal with, okay, this is how, if I can't do that, what's the next best thing that I can do? So it was just a case of reframing certain problems, and then moving forward with a solution. So yeah, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. So I was getting overwhelmed because I was overwhelming myself, whether it was a navigation issue, whether it was a steering problem, the auto helm not working, and when all you can do is go north or south, and really you need to be heading west, I was just getting frustrated. And like I said, it was because I was so sleep deprived. I was averaging 3 to 5 hours of sleep a night. So as you get sort of 6 weeks into the row, all of a sudden something comes out of left field, and now you can't process it because your brain's not working like it would do normally.
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely feel, or I can definitely imagine a sense of just defeat, really. But I'd have to experience that to actually, I'd have to experience that to actually be able to
Yeah, like
speak
I
on
said, it's
it.
hard until it actually happens. And then as the next day, you think, well, why was I getting so kind of upset about? I'm still got that same problem today, but I'm not nowhere near as emotional about it as I was yesterday. And then some of the other fun stuff was that, um, being so sleep deprived, the hallucinations. There was at one point I kind of woke up in my cabin, and I could have swore literally 6, 8 inches in front of my face was a mouse. And for the next 2 hours, I'm tearing my cabin apart trying to find this mouse because I was convinced there was a mouse in the cabin with me. And logically, or not logically, depending on how you look at it, where the boat was built and stored prior to it being shipped out to the start line was next to a cornfield, and the cornfield was cut just before the boats were shipped out. So I thought, well, it's logical that a mouse may have come out of the cornfield, got on board, and was living somewhere on the boat, and now
Right.
so all of a sudden it was there in front of me. But the following day, with a few more hours sleep, I realized, well, from the time the boat was shipped to now was like almost 4 months in the process. I had totally taken everything out of the boat on two occasions and repacked it twice, and there was no other evidence of a mouse on board prior to that thing. It was just purely an hallucination.
Wow.
And some of the other rowers, they've seen UFOs, they'd seen zombies climbing out of the water. There's all kinds of stories of how your mind can play tricks on you.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, how many days was that, and how much sleep would you get like at a time?
So for me, the entire crossing was 63 days, 2 hours, and 37 minutes. I would average on, I would say, the majority of the row between 3 and 5 hours worth of sleep a night. And on average, during the daylight hours, I would row for 3 hours, then rest an hour. And that wasn't, so let me kick back and lick my feet up. within that hour, you're cleaning yourself, you're maintaining the boat, you're making water, you're making your food, you're doing any maintenance. And then dark hours, I would switch to a 2 hours on, 2 hours off routine. So one of the big differences between being a solo and a team, whether you're a pair or a larger team, that they tend to work 2 hours on, 2 hours off, as long as it's safe to do so and you can make headway in the weather. Whereas a solo, if the weather's good, you want to make as much distance as you can. So you got to be much more tactical in the use of the weather. So I think the longest period I rode on the Atlantic was like 7 hours straight,
Wow.
um, give or take a break to obviously go to the bathroom and eat some food. But yeah, 7 hours of rowing in one long stretch, which um, it it was just because the weather was perfect and we could make a lot of distance. And I think my best day, I think I covered like 70 some odd miles, and my worst day was -2.
So when you would break, you would just, I mean, you could drift, right? Like you said,
Yeah,
-2 miles. So you, all that work, you're like, I got nowhere. I lost
yeah,
distance, but
yeah. It's yeah. There were the year before the race I did. They had phenomenal weather in the sense that it was strong, it was sustained, and it was all in the right direction. And all of the world records were broken for the fastest crossings, both in the solo, pair, and four-person class. So we kind of went into our race with that same expectation, thinking, and when we started off the first 24 hours, it was great weather. It was right in the direction that you wanted to go, and it was probably 17, 20 knots worth of sustained wind. The waves were perfect, so you could be surfing down, like almost getting up to like 7 knots on some of these
wow.
waves. Um, and then what we experienced were 3 periods of 2 to 5 days of no weather at all. I mean, the Atlantic being as flat, calm as you could ever experience. Yes, you still kind of got those big rollers that would come in, but there was no wind, which sounds idyllic. But when the boat weighs almost a ton in weight, and you're in 90 plus degree weather, like high humidity, no air conditioning, no running water, um, it's it's pretty laborious, and it just drains you.
It's like being
Um,
lost at sea, but
yeah,
you're just able
yeah,
to paddle.
yeah.
You know?
I don't know. It's the classic doldrums, but it was just you want a little bit of wind and wave action to sort of propel you along.
And this row across the Pacific, when is that taking place?
So it's creeping up on us pretty fast. So our aim is to be ready to go in San Francisco by Memorial Day weekend. Um, that's when kind of the tides start to become more favorable, and we'll just then be looking for a favorable window of weather. So we're looking for maybe 2 or 3 days where the weather is um, a little bit more convenient, as in that it's still going to be sweeping down the coast, but if it's only blowing like 10 knots, 10, 15 knots, we can work with that. If it's blowing anything more than 20 knots, then it's going to be a bit more of a slog. So, kind of leading into May, we'll start looking at long range weather forecasts and see what makes sense, and then move our um, estimated departures either up a few days or back a few days to again aim for a good 2 or 3 days of favorable weather, just so we can clear the coast. Um, and then once we've sort of started to kind of penetrate and get off the continental shelf, then we can kind of work with the weather a little bit more. So 24th, I think 24th of May to the end of May is kind of the window that we're looking at.
You got to get all the should basically ship everything out to San Francisco, and then from there,
Yeah, well, I'm just waiting to hear back from a sponsor that is a trucking company, and he said that they'll just put the trailer and boat on the back of a truck, and they'll truck it out to San Francisco.
perfect. Yeah, if you wanted to get an
Failing that,
extra,
then yes, it will. We'll have to add a few more days, and we'll just drive it out ourselves.
yeah, yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about your time in the special forces because I know you've done some interesting stuff. Do you have any type of story you could possibly share?
Yeah, like trying to tie it into the whole maritime theme. Obviously, there's many of them. Like I said, the I served for around about 12 years, 12 and a half years, and all of that, like I said, was either in, on, or under the water. But I think one serious slash humorous story. I don't know if you ever heard of a sea cat or one of these jet powered ferries.
Yeah.
They're multi-hull, typically made out of aluminum. They look more um, like a fast sailing ship today than a classic ferry. So one of those we were training on one evening. It was moving from one port to another port, and it didn't have any passengers on. So we got to play with it because the unit that I was part of, we respond to obviously terrorist incidences in the UK. So if somebody had like hijacked that ferry, we would be the responding unit to so we get to practice on all kinds of vessels, planes, trains, and automobiles. But in this one particular night, the sea state wasn't too bad, and we had about a 4 hour block to repeatedly go and chase this boat down and climb aboard. And after 2 or 3 hours of like repeating, screaming up with our boats, and our the speed that ferry can go is at the limit of the ribs that we were riding in. We're in like 28 foot ribs. Um, the beauty of the boat is that the pilot's kind of ladder dock door is towards the back of the boat, and it's at almost at water level. So for other vessels, we would have to employ like a hook and ladder type setup where we would have the hook on the vessel and then climb aboard. With this, we literally just pull up alongside and jump across. Um, so anyway, we were doing this repeatedly, and this was the last run of the evening before we kind of came into the harbour. And the sea state had picked up a little bit, and it was a struggle for our coxswains to catch up with the boat and then come alongside to a position that meant that we could sort of just jump across. On this particular last run, I was, I think, either number one or number two to jump across. We came up, like I said, the boat is, we're traveling around about 50 knots. I don't know what the equivalent is that in miles an hour, but it's fast, certainly when you're at sea level.
Right.
And as we came alongside, what had happened is um, boats were going up and down in the water, and obviously we are slightly more buoyant than the bigger boat. And there was a like a rubberized lip um, around the ferry itself, which obviously when it came alongside, it didn't scrape the harbour side. And what had happened is our boat kind of got hooked on this, and it meant that one of the props of our boat was slightly in and out of the water, meant that it was losing power. That happened at the same time as I was kind of jumping across,
Right.
and it forced our boat to peel back, and I caught my foot on something, and in almost like that classic Wile E. Coyote fashion, I reached across, and my feet were in my boat, and my hands were on the steps of the ferry, and I was like this a bridge across with nothing to grab on, and it was like the claw marks going down the side of the steps, knowing
Wow.
that I was going to fall in. Um, which again, I laugh about it now, but as I went into the water, I've got two 250 horsepower engines at full throttle, like 20 feet behind me. I thought that I was going to go straight into the props. So we're in full gear. So yes, we're wearing body armor and helmets. So I just turtled up, thinking that any second now I'm going to hit these props, and I'm just praying that it'll deflect off the body armor and not do any damage to me. And then nothing happened because this ferry is propelled by I think four big jet engines. I then get caught up into the wash, slowly sinking because the water is so kind of aerated, and
Yeah.
realizing that okay, I didn't get hit by the props. I don't know why, or if it did, I didn't feel it. And I finally popped up. There's no sign of the ferry because it's obviously long gone, traveling at that sort of speed. There's no boats. I'm just bobbing around in the water, can't hear anything, and that took a while to figure out that I had water trapped inside my helmet and the face mask that I had that um, it caused a little bit of deafness. And then I just started to check myself over, realized that, oh, I'm okay. And then again, the training kicks in. So went through the kind of recovery procedures. Within a couple of minutes, the boat came over, picked me up, dragged me in. They're all laughing. I'm kind of surprised. And I'm like, well, what are you laughing at? He said, well, we saw you went in. Then we realized, oh, what's happened? But as I'd fallen into the water, I'd also pulled out the cable to the dead man switch. So it cut the
Wow.
engines at the same time, or literally a split second ahead of myself going into the water. So again, providence, luck, someone looking after me. The boat literally fell back at the same time as I'm underneath it. I went deep six as they sort of peeled off to the side. I go through the wash and popped up a couple of 100 yards behind the boat. None the worse for wear. So yeah, one of those sort of experiences that you kind of think, did I just go through that?
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty incredible. Near death experience, but lucky. Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd like to kind of dive in, segue into kind of like what you did after Special Forces. What direction did you point your life into?
Yeah, so I was one of the youngest guys to go through selection and join the SPS when I did. So I kind of um, was fortunate enough to go through pretty quickly. Like I said, I served about 12 and a half years and then hit that ceiling where being in such a small unit, I couldn't get promoted any quicker than I had. Um, and I'd done all the work, all the jobs that I'd wanted to do. And being still so young, I thought, well, I would leave and perhaps look at a second career. So that's what I did. I came out in March 2001, and I gave myself 12 months to sort of sample various different jobs. It's changed now, but back then when I left, even though we've gone through a lot of specialized training, that not many of the qualifications kind of transfer naturally into the civilian world. The diving that we did, yes, very specialized. We're on rebreathers and dealing with explosives and other stuff that we don't get that kind of commercial certificate that you can go straight to the oil and gas industry or go to the maritime industry and say, hey, give me a job. So um, I wanted to sample different things and see what suited my personality. And I did everything from kind of piracy off the west coast of Africa and in the Malacca Straits when there was sort of a piracy problem building during that time. I looked after celebrities, did a bit of executive protection. But what I was gravitating towards was more kind of project management. And I was actually out in Indonesia working for a oil and gas client, kind of securing or planning to secure their gas fields up in the Aceh region of Indonesia when 9/11 happened, and obviously that changed the world very quickly. Indonesia being a largely Muslim country, the effects there were felt more so than a lot of other places. So the project that I was on was cancelled and forced back to the UK, not knowing what I wanted to do. But one of the first jobs that I'd had since leaving the service was actually looking after an investigative journalist doing a kind of an investigative piece on the illegal logging trade in Brazil.
Oh, that's
And I found
interesting.
that fascinating. We were literally sailing up the Amazon on this double masted yacht, jumping off into inflatables and running around the jungle, kind of interviewing people and shedding some light on the illegal logging trade. So that's great. Um, and we're getting paid to do it. So fast forward, not knowing what I was going to do now that my other job had been cancelled, a friend of mine kind of called me up and said, "Well, you've looked after journalists before, haven't you?" I went, "Yeah." well, these guys over here need someone to go to Afghanistan to look after some journalists to cover the conflict there. I was like, oh, I always wanted to go to Afghanistan, and yeah, sign me up. So yeah, 10 days later, I found myself in Kabul. I was looking after a small news crew there that happened to be CNN. We were fortunate enough to like bounce around all over the country doing various different stories. I went as far north as Salang, did some stories up in the mountains there that looked very much like the Swiss Alps. We went all the way down to Gardez and Ghazni, and were interviewing former warlords. Went all the
Wow.
way across to the Iranian border and Herat, and kind of many places in between. But kind of what brought me here and then kind of set the course for my career since leaving the military is that I was involved in a set of circumstances that had me recovering a series of tapes. Basically, I recovered bin Laden's video library and
Seriously.
carried close to 200 VHS tapes from Kandahar via Kabul, Islamabad, Dubai, London, back to Atlanta. And as a result of that, they went on to win a bunch of awards. And then, as they were looking how they were going to cover the second Gulf War, I got seconded to them to help set up all of their training and coordinate all their field safety for the second Gulf War. That mushroomed into looking after a lot of North America's media, whether that was print, radio, broadcast, both in the US and Canada. We had some other publications out of Mexico. And it wasn't just the 10 plus years in Baghdad. We also covered Afghanistan, and then also a lot of other kind of natural disasters, Katrina, the earthquakes in Haiti, earthquakes in Chile, kind of earthquakes in Japan, and subsequent tsunami. So yeah, that kind of brought me to Atlanta back in initially in 2003, and moved here in 2006, and for about 16 years supported and kept safe a lot of the folks that you see on TV today in various different circumstances. So proud to say that I'm now a U.S. citizen. I've been here, like I said, 21 years. Moved from just news into sort of news and entertainment. Worked a lot of long form documentary teams, TV programs, and that now is kind of ballooned into looking after large feature productions, whether that's unscripted TV or whether that's movies like you'd see at the on any of the big streaming networks or even the mainstream kind of movie houses. So yeah, I've seen it all from war correspondents right through to movie stars. So no 2 days are ever the same, but it keeps things interesting.
Yeah, that's quite the career. It sounds like a good time. I mean, that's incredible. In Atlanta, it's the what? That's the Hollywood of the East Coast, right? There's a lot
Yeah,
of production
um,
happening there.
I don't know where they rank at the moment, but I know 2 or 3 years ago, I think there were more winners of the various Emmys and Golden Globes and all the other
Hmm.
accolades within that world were filmed here in Georgia, not just Atlanta, but in Georgia than anyone else. So yeah, when I was working for Turner downtown, um, pretty much every week there would be anywhere between 5 and 7 productions being filmed um, in the city limits.
So then from there, you segued into starting Tame the Kraken.
Yeah. So, and again, the original plan was to go into the Atlantic, do the Atlantic crossing, and then sort of segue from there into something that was more coastal and more sustainable to drive Tame the Kraken, which was the original nonprofit, and to kind of be able to raise money for various different programs, whether they were rowing, recreational therapy in or um, pass through money to other VSOs or services that provide relief or support to veterans with mental health complaints. Um, COVID comes along, and it's a story that's been heard by many, that basically blew apart our plans. We couldn't really do what we wanted. We were busy just kind of getting our own business started and sustaining that, and having to work. So the nonprofit took a sideline. And it wasn't until really about 12, 18 months ago that we thought, well, we, we have this unfinished business. So let's look at the Pacific. And that's when I started to kind of play with the idea of, okay, let me try and find another boat. The boat that I have now is my original boat. It's done 3 Atlantic crossings, my own and 2 others. And I was very fortunate that the guy that had finished with it was willing to sell it back to me. So yeah, reunited with my old boat and now ready for the Pacific. So again, the same aim as before. Use the ocean crossing as a way to raise attention, develop some more relationships, and create a more sustainable program, and then set up what we call Road to Recovery, which will provide like a pod, which is between 6 and 8 boats that we will then train other veterans to kind of create their own rowing program. And we're going to be using coastal rowing boats. They're very robust in their durability and the materials that are used to construct it. So you can row them on flat water, on lakes, off the coast. They're very stable, so it's
Hmm.
easy if you've got folks with any kind of limiting factors. And again, I support an adaptive rowing program here in Atlanta as well. So um, you'd be surprised how easy it is to get someone on the water with a certain level of confidence and competence to row. And rowing is very therapeutic. So our idea is that we'll set up these pods and kind of train the trainer, and then they'll be self-run. So you'll have pods of um, veterans first around the southeast, and then hopefully further afield that will be running their own sort of peer-to-peer, veteran-to-veteran rowing programs. And then from there, our aim is hopefully to have a near coastal inter-service race that will be kind of that annual draw. Think of
Yeah,
Army
absolutely.
Navy game, but in ocean rowing boats, where you'll get Army versus Navy versus Air Force versus Marines, all vying for some sort of trophy and bragging rights. And that will hopefully then drive more money into the program that we can then obviously expand the program further, and maybe even create a fleet of veteran rowed boats to again either row the Atlantic or Pacific, and again pour it back into the
Yeah,
same pot.
yeah, dominate the industry. No, I love what you're doing, Tim. Um, and I just think it's an incredible thing. And your story is incredible. Where can people go to help support you? How can they help support you?
Yeah, so Tame the Kraken on either Instagram, Facebook. Easy enough to find us. Just Google Tame the Kraken, and there should be enough material out there to find us. Our website is tamethekraken.us, all one word. So that's TameTheKraken, because there are a couple of different spellings of Kraken. You'll be able to find us there. Tells you a little bit more about who we are, what we're doing, the needs and wants in terms of sponsorship. There's an option to sort of donate, follow along, join the newsletter. And then as we get closer, we'll put out information. We will have a tracker on the boat, so you will be able to kind of follow along and maybe even send us messages that we can respond to while we're out on the water as well.
That's awesome. Okay, well, I look forward to it. And again, remind me, when are you? When's your next crossing? When's that San
Yeah.
Francisco to the Big Island?
Uh, Middle of May, we should have some big announcements. So again, I think Memorial Day weekend is when we hope to be in San Francisco, and then we'll be departing either in or around Memorial Day between kind of the 24th and the end of May.
Awesome. Well, we're definitely gonna keep an eye on that. See where you're at. What are you expecting? How long of a trip you think?
So we're hoping around about 45 days. Uh,
45. Okay.
Happy if it's a little less than that. Um, I've got to double check, but in my research so far, it's never been done by a father and son team before. So we get from San Francisco to Hawaii, we shall set a new world record.
There you go.
If we can do it quickly and maybe beat the time as well, then maybe we can get a second world record out of it. But again, Mother Nature and the weather will dictate that.
Well, you at least have one world record to look forward to when you get to Hawaii. Well, Tim, I really appreciate you coming on and telling us your story and what you're doing. Again, that's tamethekraken.us. Check them out.
Correct.
Um, Support them. Do what you can. They're doing an incredible thing. So, Tim, yeah, thanks again for coming on.
You're welcome. Appreciate it. Thanks, Ben.